Welcome, everybody, to the Multipli Podcast. My name is Josh Lopes. I'm your host and the COO and a growth partner at Multipli Tech. At Multipli, we specialize in building custom software, mobile apps, and websites that deliver massive ROI for our clients. We also provide fractional CTO and AI implementation consulting. And today, I'm super excited about our episode because we are joined by a serial entrepreneur, a healthcare innovator, who his team has helped over 60,000 individuals to successfully navigate Medicare and health insurance with confidence and clarity. From Bank of America to founding Nuvo Health and the Medicare store, he's truly making a difference in healthcare distribution. And we got him on the show today. Calvin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Josh. It's good to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. I know I've enjoyed just some of the preliminary conversations that we've had so far. This is going to be a great episode, Calvin. Why don't you start by sharing a little bit more about your personal and professional background? And I'd love if you could hone in specifically on the part of your story where you decided to make the leap from corporate and go on to your own in the entrepreneurial world.
Sure, Josh. I'd love to share. So my background is storied and there's a lot to it. In fact, I'm actually releasing a memoir in August about some of my personal background. But on my professional side, when I was going to college, I was looking for some ways that I could increase my financial situation. And Bank of America was offering tuition reimbursement for tellers. And I said, well, this will work out great. So I started as a teller for Bank of America and then began to climb that ladder unintentionally at first and then very intentionally in the end, and climbed to the point where I was over many branches in the area of California and Nevada, and reached this point in my career where I was in corporate, had learned so much and had grown so much, but was doing things for other people and was realizing that I always had wanted to have my own company, to be an entrepreneur, to build something. I mean, I was the kid that as a young kid, I was trying to, I was collecting cans on the side of the road, trying to earn money, so that was always my direction, was to do something on my own. And the opportunity presented itself at not perhaps the best time in the world to move from banking into insurance. And just as I quit my high-powered, high-title VP position at Bank of America, with lots of people looking to me and reporting to me, I quit everything and said, I am going to be an insurance agent, and I'm going to sit at people's kitchen tables and help them to make a decision about Medicare. And my wife looked at me and said, oh my goodness, I support you. Well, I showed her all my spreadsheets and said, this is how it's going to work out financially, and appealed to her logical side. But, right then we discovered that after many, many years of struggles, my wife was pregnant. And so it was a starting over period where I go from, having the title, having the security, having the income, being known, in banking, to working in insurance. And people say, how did you end up in insurance? Well, the answer is nobody intends to end up in insurance. It's sort of just, it finds you. And that's what happened to me. So I moved from California back to Las Vegas, started as one independent insurance agent, sitting across the kitchen table, helping people with their Medicare insurance about 15 years ago. And then from there, the story goes crazy and we begin to expand and I begin to hire people and eventually reach the point today where Nuvo Health is the parent company, owning multiple insurance agencies that help people with Medicare and health insurance. Now, starting as one person sitting across the kitchen table, helping one person at a time. Fast forward to today, we have helped over 60,000 people across the country in every state to make a good determination about their health and Medicare insurance, and then to support them afterwards with the issues that come up. So that's my story in a super tight nutshell of how I went from banking into insurance.
That's awesome, Calvin. And I can so connect with that. First of all, I used to work at Bank of America. I started my career there as well. So I know what it's like. And I also made the jump. It wasn't quite 8 years, but after 2 years, I made a jump out of finishing the rotational program that was supposed to put you on the fast track. I know you're familiar with those programs, and totally quit everything to start my own business with my twin brother. And people thought we were crazy. So, but I can also very much connect with having that superpower, AKA a wife who believes in you, even if she doesn't fully understand, right? Somebody who can see the dream and doesn't necessarily want to get involved in my spreadsheets and the spreadsheets that organize my spreadsheets, but believes in me. And that belief is the multiplier. So very cool story. I'm curious, like early on, especially once you got that news that, wow, after this time of hardship where you and your wife couldn't necessarily get pregnant, the timing of getting pregnant right as you made that jump, what kind of pressure were you feeling? And was that a good thing? Was that a bad thing for your new entrance into the entrepreneurial space? Dive into that a bit more for us.
Yeah, it was a combination of responsibility, the mantle of fatherhood beginning to fall on my shoulders.
Yes.
Mixed with the excitement of doing my own thing. It definitely added to the mix of everything. I remember that we had sold our home in California. We moved to Las Vegas. We bought a condo. It was during the Great Recession. And so we bought a condo in Las Vegas for cash because everything was so, the prices were so depressed here. And my wife realized, oh my gosh, I might be pregnant. And we're talking, a 7-8 year journey that had come before this, when we were on our last hope kind of situation. She went to the bathroom. She went to the pharmacy and bought like 8 pregnancy tests, every kind they had. I didn't know she was going to do that. She came home, she had a bag with every single kind of pregnancy test that they had. She went in the bathroom. She tested all of them. She was in there for a long time, to the point where I'm like ready to knock on the door. Like, babe, what's going on? She opens the door, crying, squealing. Every single one of them said positive, like 8 pregnancy tests across the counter. So yeah, how did that affect me? Well, yeah, there was a lot on the line, because when I quit my job, one of the things that we talked about was, hey, look, we got married when we both were in careers. She was a professor at UNLV. I was a branch manager at Bank of America. We had great incomes, and we were dinks, dual income, no kids. And so we said, well, you know what? If this doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. We can figure it out. It's just the two of us. All of a sudden, it wasn't, and that changed a lot of things, and it put on some pressure. But I don't know that it changed what I did. I was very excited, very determined, but it definitely raised the stakes, and it was go time.
I like that, and I agree with you that there's a mantle of fatherhood. It's a level of responsibility that can be a good thing, and ultimately, it forces you to do something that maybe you couldn't do just for you, but you can do it for the people who love you the most. So as you're making that journey, you're literally sitting in people's living rooms, their kitchens. You're walking them through the basics of Medicare and health insurance, and then things start to grow. At what point did you realize that, wow, maybe this isn't just going to be me as an independent agent? Maybe I can do more with this. Talk about that journey where it like transitioned from just you to building a team and eventually your own brokerage.
Yeah, I'd love to respond to that. And I would start by saying, if any aspiring entrepreneurs watch this podcast, I want to give you a very good piece of advice. And it is that you can do, in many cases, better as an entrepreneur if you have some corporate experience. You need to have plans and foundations and things to build from in order to become an entrepreneur. Oftentimes, and it's not to say it's the only way, but it worked very well for me, and it could work very well for other people. And so when I started sitting across the kitchen table and helping people to choose their Medicare plan, I began to realize that there were a lot of people that needed help, and I began to grow referral sources through my network, through doctors' offices and through other community partners. That let me say it this way: the foundation is always do the right thing, right? And if you always do the right thing, it will come back. Now, it doesn't come back if you're not a good marketer. You have to do the right thing, and you got to get credit for it, right? So I would help a patient of a doctor's office. I would go to the doctor's office, walk into the doctor's office, and say, "Hey, I just helped your patient, Susie Jones, and she really loves you guys. I just wanted to let you know that I made sure that she has insurance now that you guys accept and everything." So, always do the right thing. Always get credit for it. And it began to expand, and the word of mouth spread, and referrals coming in. And so my initial growth happened because I had too much opportunity. And that's the way you want to grow. You don't want to grow because you need to 2x, 5x, 10x. And a lot of times it's like, oh, we need to 10x. How do I 10x? How do I 10x? Well, don't try to 10x your company. Try to x your opportunity. And so as people began to refer, and I was getting more than I could handle, I needed to expand my one-person agency. I had to, or I couldn't take care of all the people that were now relying on me. And that was the start of the growth.
That's awesome, Calvin. That's awesome. Very cool. That's an interesting take too. And I can tell that we've read some of the same books, X is Easier Than 2X, and even just X by Grant Cardone, 2 different approaches using the same multiplier there. So we'll focus on 10X is easier than 2X, because that book talks a lot about setting floors, the way that you frame things, and it speaks a lot to the process of scaling and how many companies just totally missed the mark. So as you were scaling, you were making sure that you created a level of opportunity first that you alone couldn't support, or you alone no longer desired to support. And that became your launch point for bringing other people to the table. Am I hearing you right there?
Yeah. I love the comparison of those 2 books, by the way. And, I don't want to say negative things about one or the other, but I will say that I prefer one of them over the other. One of them, I think, has legitimate strategies and can teach you to be a great entrepreneur. And the other one is a lot of hype. So without saying which is which, 10X is better than 2X is the one that you should be reading. So 10x is easier than 2x. Ben Hardy, who I admire and who I've met on multiple occasions, his book really is fantastic. And the point of his book is not, a lot of 10x stuff is hoorah, hoorah, hoorah. Take the deal and then figure out how to do it afterwards is the motto of a lot of 10x. And that's not a true scalable way of doing business. 10x is easier than 2x book by Ben Hardy is talking about how you have to do a different mentality. The mentality that takes your company and doubles it is, let's just do more of what we're doing. But the mentality of my company at 10 times says, my company at 10 times what it is today cannot be the same company that it is at 2 times today. I can't double it, then double it, then double it, then double it, then double it. Because then as you increase in scale and size, you increase complexity. There's a lot of research that says, if you can do something using your existing team and by supplementing them with technology, that is much, much more efficient, because every time you add a team member, you don't double the complexity. It's 10 times the complexity. You take 2 people to 3 people, you've 10x your complexity. You take 3 people to 4 people, you've 10x your complexity. And so, you do tech. Tech is supplementing your team with tech instead of just expanding your team is the way to go wherever possible. But to go back to your question, the idea that Ben Hardy teaches so well is true for me. And coupled with that is the understanding of the 80-20 rule, to understand that you have to always be leveling up. Whatever you were doing yesterday, you need to get rid of 80% of it and go with the 20%, the top 20% that takes you to the next level. And whatever you're doing tomorrow, you need to cut 80% again. And, for example, I look at my history. Today, I'm talking with you on a podcast. And, in my company, I am no longer the CEO because I had to cut 80%. And now, I'm like the chief rah-rah officer, right? I'm out spreading the message and advocating for my industry. And, a really impactful podcast or LinkedIn post or something like that will have more impact at the level that I'm at today than sitting down with someone and helping them enroll in their insurance, or sitting down with my managers and telling them how to help people, how to help their agents to enroll in insurance. And so Jeremy Weiser became the CEO of my company and became a partner in my company because I needed to, again, level up in the vein of next is easier than 2x to cut out another 80%. I'm eyeing what the next jump will be like when I have fully filled this 100%. What then do I cut of the 80% to level myself up again to that top 20%? And so I love that way of thinking, and it makes sense to me, and it's actionable, and it is how I've been building my companies.
That's awesome, Calvin. That's amazing. I think that's a really good application and contrast. I would agree with you on that dichotomy. I do get energized by both of the books, but I get really sound principles. I love listening to Dr. Myron Golden, to Ben Hardy, and the guys in that area, thinking about just like, hey, it's not just what do I need to do more of, it's what I need to cut as well, and what I need to put below the floor. So kind of along the same vein here of talking scale, thinking bigger, most people build an agency. Actually, most people really don't even build an agency, right? They just kind of continue to operate in that fixed mindset of I'll maximize what I personally can do. Some people build an agency. You've gone beyond that and you've built a whole ecosystem now, right?
Yeah.
That's rare. Talk a little bit about like, how do you make sure that the systems, the support structure is in place? Because not everybody is obviously operating at your level where they're focused on how do I spread the general message? How do I put tools out there that are going to get our industry known on the web? How am I going to record podcasts? You still need the people in the kitchens and in the dining rooms sitting down and helping people enroll. So how have you built an ecosystem that empowers people at every step along the journey?
It's not as easy to explain because it's years and years of trial and error and moving forward. Jeremy Weiser, the CEO of Nuvo Health, who is, my right-hand man and one of my best friends, he always says, if you're falling, fall forward. And that's what we did for many, many years. We kept falling forward and falling forward and falling forward. People say, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, whatever phrase you want to use. It takes a lot of trial and error, but there are some sound principles that you have to follow. And one of them for me was I had to break through some difficult and challenging barriers. And many of those barriers are personal barriers, but they're also financial barriers. And, to get to the point where you can hand something off and say, I'm okay with that person giving their best effort, even if it doesn't match mine, and realize that that's okay. Dan Martell, He's another business idol of mine and friend. He says 80% done by someone else is 100% freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And I love the phrase because, first of all, he says freaking awesome. And I'm like, hey, thanks for using a word I would use. But yeah, 80% done by someone else is 100% freaking awesome. And you have to accept that. Now, can you accept someone else doing 50%? No, right? You have to have some standards. But so many people, especially founders, have a really difficult time letting go because they know that they can do it better than everybody else. And I'm not saying that I can do everything better than everybody else, but there were a lot of things that I had to hand off and realize that they weren't going to be done at the same level that I could do them. And then along the way, in doing that, I found that after I handed some things off, not everything, but many of the things I handed off, I realized some people could do at 120% of what I could do, but I couldn't find them until I was willing to let go. And so that's the core principle that it took to expand, is that I had to find ways to release and to let go, even when it was scary, and even when I was very dependent on the income stream and the referral stream or whatever it was that I was letting go of.
That's great. That's great perspective, Calvin. Appreciate you sharing that. So you've talked a good bit about referral partners in here. What do you typically look for, and like what are you looking for right now in this season in terms of different types of partnerships to come into the umbrella of your ecosystem? I know that you're an investor as well, beyond what you do in the insurance world. What types of partnerships and opportunities are you looking for right now? And what do you look for in partners, just from like a core perspective of any partner that I bring into my enterprise is going to have A, B, and C qualities?
The last thing that I'm looking for is a quick jump that then puts me in a situation where I have compromised my integrity or the integrity of my companies. And so what I'm looking for is quality partners, good people who are in business to be of service to others. And that's where we are in our company, is that we're in business to be of service to people and to be of service to our clients. We actually call them members, because we don't call them clients or customers or seniors or whatever. We call them, they're like our members because they're part of our family, So I'm looking for partners that match that. Now, the type of partners, it could be across the board, right? People who we partner with to reach those who are on Medicare or who need health insurance. Partners who help us to be better at the technology that we have, or the way that we service, or what have you. There's multiple types of partners, but the core is that they have to match our core values. We started about 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago now, to define our core values. We had core values, but they weren't like our core values. And so we went through this whole process where every one of our employees, as well as our independent agents who are contracted contractors, we sat together and hashed out what is it that represents who we are. Some of it is who we aspire to be. Much of it is who we believe we already are or were. And then we found a framework for it. And that framework for our core values is agents of change. A, absolutely positively gritty. G, good people doing good things. E, enjoying work and life. Laugh every day. And noticeably professional. T, team and family. S, striving for excellence. And that became a major mantra. Awesome. And so when we're looking at partners, we say, hey, does that partner, does that hired or employee, does that contractor, whoever, will they match our core values? Are they going to be fun to work with? And at the same time, strive for excellence and do the right thing always, and et cetera. So that has become our foundation for partnership, for employees, for contractors, and for everything that we do.
Love it. I love it. That's really cool. What a mnemonic. I'm sure your team loves that, and it makes it memorable as well. So, and it's cool that you brought them in on the process as well, that it wasn't something that you just pushed top down, but you made a conversation with your team, because I know that makes 100% of the difference in the buy-in, at least of some of your leaders, in getting that message out to the group. So very cool. You've talked a little bit already about tech and marketing systems. I like the way that you talked about tech augmenting what people can do in a way that's oftentimes more affordable and just smarter from a complexity perspective of the organization. Talk to us a little bit about tech and marketing systems and what you've seen in the industry overall. Like, you have in your position right now, you're not in the everyday CEO role. You've played every role from independent agent all the way up to CEO, and now to owner outside of the business, working on the business instead of in the business, and really just on the industry. What are you seeing in the world of healthcare, insurance, Medicare, from a tech and marketing perspective? What's working well? What opportunities are there? And maybe some of the things that you guys are doing at your portfolio of companies.
Yeah, there's nothing more like discussed right now than AI, of course, because everything is about AI. Some people say, AI is going to replace everybody. It's going to replace insurance agents, like websites replaced, travel agents, a great number of travel agents, et cetera. And today, I would say, yes, there's so much focus on white collar. In a couple of years, when AI begins to be robotics and everything, what's happening with all the robots and everything like that, and AI, and they're AI powered robots, then everyone will be worried about blue collar. Should you hire an AI plumber, a robot plumber? So I think everybody will be impacted, but I like the idea of AI augmented, and at the same time, I like the idea of quality rising to the top. I was having a discussion with one of the leaders of industry in Medicare insurance just yesterday, and we were discussing this at great length, saying what's going to happen. And what we have landed on, and what I believe, is that the cream will rise to the top, and that there will be a lot of people who do subpar, and this is across industry. This isn't about Medicare insurance or anything. It could be car sales. It's already kind of happened with car sales. But the lower bottom, the people that are not in it for the right reasons, the ones that don't have values, they are going to lose and lose and lose and lose, and the cream will rise. So, will there, in my view, there will always be a need for human interaction.
Yes.
And there will always be a need for relationship. And so we are building our companies to be that. So there's a lot to talk about in tech, and there's some really cool stuff that's happening in tech, but I'm not looking at tech to say, how can I replace human relationship with tech? I'm saying, how can I augment human relationship with tech? And so one of the things that we did is we said one of the biggest challenges in running a Medicare insurance agency with many, many independent agents and brokers is just being able to answer all of the questions. When an agent is sitting at the kitchen table discussing Medicare insurance, they're with a senior and they need an answer right now. And so we have sales, managers. We don't call them sales managers. Everybody else calls them sales managers, by the way. We call them relationship managers or arms. They're like out there helping. But the point is that they can't be there every second to answer every phone call, every text. But AI can and can answer it very well. So we created something called Medicare Genius. And we trained Medicare Genius using AI on all kinds of rules and just everything you could possibly find from pure sources so that it wouldn't imagine something up that's the wrong answer. And our agents and brokers, they use Medicare Genius, and it answers now 90% of the questions that they needed to have answered, so that they can then provide a confident answer to others. So it's a real simple thing in the context of everything else that's happening in AI, but it augmented the people and the relationship instead of trying to replace. And so that's kind of where I'm at with tech.
100% agreed. And even having a tech company where AI consulting services is one of our offerings, we always tell people, we're not looking to provide this service so that you can replace people. We have the mindset, let's let tech do what tech can do so that people can do the things that only people can do. And I couldn't agree with you more. Having 3 young children, I don't want my kids to be on screens all day. Sure, I want them to learn how to think and how to access some of the technology and the tools that are going to be available, but I care way more about whether they can look somebody in the eye, smile, shake a stranger's hand, and introduce themselves than whether or not they can use my iPhone. And somehow they seem to figure that out anyway. But that same principle applies to the people that we work with from a tech perspective. It's not, hey, let's replace Glenda. It's let's get rid of the red tape and the administrative work that every organization has tolerated that should be below their floor. Let's have tech and marketing systems augment people, to your point, so that maybe what people are doing well for 7 out of 8 working hours of the day, tech can do 24/7, right? And tech doesn't have bad days. AI, it doesn't get emotional. AI isn't excited to clock out on Friday at 4 to go see your grandson's baseball game or to go have a pool day in a hot summer. So I totally agree with you. I think that's a brilliant use case too, in terms of building an LMS that your team can access, and it can probably eliminate a lot of the friction that your ARMs used to feel at the same time. So now it frees up everybody for more creative thinking, more time with clients. Not only does that allow you to provide the most value, but it eliminates friction at your company, and it allows you to reach more people as well. So I think that's a great application, Calvin. And I think that we're going to continue to discover more and more applications with both tech and marketing. And we like to talk about both of them because I really believe that it's almost irresponsible to think about tech without having marketing in mind as well. You have to make sure that systems can play nice together, which is not always easy. It's easier said than done. And I think that so much not only can be done in terms of streamlining back-end systems, but also automating some of the outbound process. Again, so that rather than thinking about How do I manually send X number of emails, LinkedIn messages, texts to my A, B, and C list? All of these techniques that, sure, they work, right? But what are processes and keep in touch programs that tech can help augment? That's something that we've implemented at Multipli and that we help other clients implement as well.
What's
But what
amazing is that now you can have custom solutions without the hefty custom prices
Yes,
that it took before. You had to have something built just for you. It would always be inferior. It wouldn't stay up to date. It was better to just buy software from software engineers, et cetera. But with vibe coding and everything that's happening these days, you can create that custom solution or have it created with someone like Multipli, with where you have real knowledge and know-how. But it's so much easier, and I just think it unlocks all kinds of things instead of trying to always put the square peg in the round hole, which we have done many, many times
sure.
and continue to do. I mean, there's not everything is fixed yet, but you know, we use for a long time we used a CRM that did not fit our industry, but it was like, well, if we reshape ourselves, we can fit in their square hole, even though we're a round peg. So it's great to see that changing. And at the same time, being in tech, you would have a lot of opportunity to modernize business.
100%, Calvin. And that's why I mentioned on the front end that we've been taking this fractional CTO play when working with a lot of companies, rather than just guessing and rather than just being a service provider or an order taker. We like to say that we want to come on as an extension of your team. We want to be a part of your leadership team where we think about your business in the same way that we think about our business. Let's prioritize ROI at every stage along the journey. And even though you're telling us that you want your own mobile app or custom solution, maybe you don't need that. Maybe after you actually get somebody that is in this world on a day-to-day basis because you're busy being the owner and you're not in the weeds every day. You want to spend more time with your clients and your team. Maybe you don't need that $250,000 custom software solution. Maybe you actually just need to better utilize what you're already paying for because you're using 40% of it. And if you figured out the other 60%, you'd be in much better shape. Or to your point, a lot of times, maybe it's like, hey, the solution that you're using right now is actually not a solution. It's causing massive friction. And let's go on one of these platforms, like you're saying, the Vibe, low code, no code platforms, where literally we can talk together to the platform in almost like a chat GPT type interface. And it can start building something that very well could be usable as an MVP, or at least can be the model for something that we want to test out and really get user feedback on before we start to build anything custom. So I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that the nature of the tech industry as a whole is drastically shifting. When you think about how much has changed, even just within the past year, to think about what it's going to look like for our kids 5 to 10 years down the road, it's almost beyond what we can comprehend, even thinking about tech all the time.
Well, I like what you're saying because it's one of the first times I hear someone in tech sound like us in insurance. When we sit down with someone, oftentimes what we find is that the plan that they have is the right plan. They just don't understand it or don't know how to use it. And I haven't always heard people in other industry or in tech talk that way. So it's refreshing to hear you say that.
Totally. Well, like you, we're big believers. Like we call our business Multipli because we want people and companies to be fruitful and multiply. We're big believers that when you do the right thing, sometimes at your own short-term expense, that it's going to come back to you, right? It's going to come back to you in goodwill, future projects, referrals, and there's enough room to do the right thing. So 100%, we want to save people money and we want to generate enough ROI where they can't imagine not wanting us to be a part of their leadership team. Calvin, great perspective on tech, marketing, scaling. I feel like we could genuinely talk for hours about this, and I would love to keep in touch and hear more about the books that you're reading. Actually, I'll stop and ask a quick question there. So we talked about 10x is easier than 2x. Aside from your personal book, which I want to get to right after this, what are 2 or 3 of your favorite books that you feel like every founder or leader should read as a part of their ecosystem and library?
Oh my goodness. I wish I could shorten it to 2 or 3 books. I have a pretty large library. In fact, last year in 2024, I made a goal of reading 1 book a week for the year and completed 52 books. Yeah. And while I did that, I reread a few that I thought were very good. I would say, we already talked about Ben Hardy, and he's written books, some of his own, and then he's written to start for an entrepreneur. Read the transformational trilogy of Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan. There's so many good books there. Other than that, I would say one surprise book that has had a major impact on my life is maybe not a surprise, but The Power of Now. And it's a psychological book. I say psychological, it's a psychological, spiritual, whatever you want to call it, that talks about being in the moment and being an observer of your own mind. And it's surprising how impactful that was for me at home as well as in business. So I love a great business book, and I've read practically everything that you can that anyone else has read, I feel like. But that book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, had such an impact on me, and the ability to observe yourself and observe your thoughts. When you get in maybe it's the meeting, you're going into a really important meeting and you start to get a little nervous. You're a salesperson, maybe you're a business, maybe you're an entrepreneur, you're a startup, you know how important that meeting is and it really needs to go a certain way. You can just get in your own head. That's one example. It can also happen in other parts of your life. Eckhart talks about being the observer of your mind and just seeing what your body is doing and feeling it. And as you observe it, you don't try to change it. You don't try to tell it what to do. You just observe it. And when you observe it, it's amazing how things change or how it settles or what have you. And you can stay in the moment. And it has impacted me in many ways in life and business. So I would share that one because that was one of the big ones from last year for me. But again, any of the Dan Sullivan, Ben Hardy books, I couldn't possibly recommend more. They're great business and life books.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And I totally agree. I've read all of the Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy books multiple times, if you count the Audible listens, just recently within the past year. And I feel like they've made a big difference on the business that my brothers and I have been able to build here. It's always challenging, like you referenced earlier, to really think about, okay, things that have worked well up to this point are not the things that are going to carry us to where we actually want to go. What do I need to totally cut? It's not always what do I need to optimize. It's what do I need to cut? It's a challenging thought process, but it's fun. And it forces you to have those strategic reset points built in where it's not just do more, hustle, which is easy to get into in your space, like in a world like insurance, in a world like direct sales, any type of sales role, right? Where it's constantly you eat what you kill. Sometimes you have to force yourself to reset and to say, hey, are my overall systems, thought processes really aligning with my future self and the business that I want to build versus just a business that is kind of all over the place? And I think that helps you to just be more present, to your point too. I have not read The Power of Now yet, so I'm going to add it to the list, but I know that's something I'm consistently working on, is just being present. As a entrepreneur, a hustler, it's easy to always be thinking about like, hey, I'm so focused on 2 or 3 steps ahead, or the 6 conversations that I had today, that you're not physically present when your kid just wants you to play baseball in the backyard. And that's something I continue to challenge myself on. And I've got a great group of other young entrepreneurs and men around me that challenge me. Hey, how many date nights have you taken this week? Not just how many deals have you closed? How many times have you really been there for defining moments with your kids? Not just what are the KPI stats and the growth that looks good on a PowerPoint. So
yeah, that's
thanks for
good.
sharing that, Calvin.
I would tell you to listen to it because then you get to hear his voice as he teaches. So Audible,
Okay.
in this case, I think is the better way to go.
Thank you for that tip. I've noticed that with a couple authors that they sometimes throw in additional goodies along the way too. They don't just read exactly what's in the book, they include more. And just hearing their voice and their tone can help. So I'll definitely do that. So let's transition now, Calvin, into what you just wrote. You just finished your first memoir. I know we're catching you even after you were up super late last night getting things across the finish line. Tell us a little bit more about your book.
I appreciate that. Yeah, the manuscript was final last night. And so, a few hours ago. But I am releasing a memoir about my life. And, I'm not an arrogant person. So it's sometimes it's funny for me and I feel a little uncomfortable, and I'm getting better about saying, hey, I have a really, really interesting story and I'm ready to share it. And my story is one, if someone meets me and they see me today, being an influencer around Medicare policy, having interactions with politicians in Washington, D.C., doing podcasts and having a successful business, et cetera, they would have no idea where I came from and would assume, most likely, that I was born to opportunity and having the opportunity to go to school and to go to college and having supportive parents and structures around me. And that was not the case for me. And so I have taken this past year to write my memoir. It's called Hiding from the School Bus. You can learn more about it at hidingfromtheschoolbus.com. And my memoir starts with me being born into a fundamentalist, I will say fundamentalist loosely, Mormon family. Fundamentalist not in that my parents practiced polygamy, because they did not, but fundamentalist in the form that they had some very fringe beliefs about life, about religion, about God. And when I came home from the hospital as a baby, I was the seventh of 9 children. My mother handed me to my sister and said, it was a few days before her birthday, said, "Happy birthday. This one is yours." And my sister essentially began to raise me until I reached a point where my father realized that I believed as a baby and as an infant that she was my mother instead of my mother, and took me from her. And that is the start of a lot of trauma that existed throughout my childhood, including abuse and child labor and other things. But it's not a terrible story. It actually is in a beautiful story that I realize as I go through life, that even though I don't believe in my parents' fringe beliefs, that God has always been with me and has been guiding and protecting and helping me along my journey. And eventually, I never go to school. I'm never allowed to participate in school. At 21 years old, I got my GED. And at 22 years old, I managed to get into college, convincing a college admission person, convincing a college admission counselor that I could, if as a non-admitted student, do well. And if I did well, she would then allow me to be admitted to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And so that's how I got into college, eventually graduated with my bachelor's in business administration, and down the journey that I shared with you early, professional journey to where I am today. So, someone may look at me and say, well, that guy probably was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. That has not been the case. I have fought and fought. And at the end, I would say the end of the journey, I'm turning 50 in August. At this point in my journey, I have rebuilt my faith around a loving God. I have stayed with my religion, which is different than a lot of people who suffered from religious trauma, because the religion that I stayed with and that I believe in isn't the religion of my parents, because they had altered it in many interesting and odd ways. And so that's what I'm releasing on August 16th. My memoir comes out. I'm very excited to share my story. At this point, I wonder how widely it will go. And at the same time, if it goes nowhere, it has been a great journey for me to be able to write it out and to publish it, if nothing else, for my wife, my children, and my grandchildren that will follow.
Calvin, that's amazing. As you're sharing, I'm thinking about a lot of things. First of all, that you had to go through that, but God doesn't waste pain. I agree with you in that God loves us through those seasons. Sometimes what isn't even necessarily from God, he allows to make us stronger. And I think that your case is a classic example of tests becoming testimonies. I think about Joseph in the Bible. So many people that could have chosen to have like a victim mindset along the journey, but instead chose to be victorious, that were elevated along the way and worked hard and chose not to be bitter. And because of that, we're blessed. So, and clearly now, not only have you been blessed, but you've created an environment and an ecosystem where your family can be blessed, and so many other families can benefit from the team and the services that you've provided to tens and hundreds of thousands of people now. So
it's really important, as you said, to keep a positive mentality. And for some people, that's natural. For me, it's half natural and half not, and half learned, to have that positive mentality. But as you keep trudging along and you keep, and not trudging in a negative way, but like keep moving forward. One of the things that I feel like I was blessed with is that sometimes I have a short memory. And you know what? That's great. I love to forget whatever bad thing happens. Sometimes it's good to just move forward, right? But I reached a point some years ago where I had a loving wife. We had just had our baby. We're struggling through business, putting everything into it, putting every dollar back in and what have you. But there's so much happiness there. And this is what I tell people. You keep moving forward towards that horizon, and you reach a point where you realize that your life is pretty good and you trudge through some hardship. Yes, everybody does. Then you can look back and say, hey, I wouldn't have arrived here if I hadn't gone through that. And so sometimes people ask me, don't you wish you could go back and change that? Absolutely not. If I changed anything that happened in my past, I wouldn't be me and I wouldn't be here. And I love where I am. Yeah, there's always more horizon. Ben Hardy, he talks about the horizon's always moving. You need to look back and realize that you've come a long way. I guess maybe I'm saying the same thing. Look back and realize, hey, you've come a long way. Appreciate it. Don't get stuck in the gap between here and the horizon. Love where you are and appreciate it, and say, you know what? I'm happy with who I am and where I am. Yeah, I still need to make improvements and changes, but let's just take a moment and appreciate where we are. When you can reach the point where you can do that, then you accept everything that happened to you. And that's what I've done. I've accepted it all. I actually appreciated it all. In my memoir and my acknowledgments, I say thank you to my parents. Our journey was difficult and it was painful, but I wouldn't be here without it. So keep moving forward, reach a point where you're happy where you are, look back and say, hey, I've come a long way, and realize that you wouldn't be there if you didn't go through those things. It was all worth it.
That's great, Calvin. Reframing your past to serve you. I love that. I think that's the way that Ben Hardy says it. And you're describing that perfectly right now. That's amazing. Calvin, this has been an incredible conversation. We've talked business. We've talked the entrepreneurial journey, talked faith and family, your memoir, your story. I'm excited for it to come out and to get my own personal copy. Is there anything that you want to share about Nuvo Health? Any concluding thoughts in general for entrepreneurs who may be tuning in?
No, I don't have anything else to share about Nuvo Health, but I just appreciate the opportunity to be on here with you, Josh. It's always an enjoyable conversation. For anybody who's watching, just keep moving ahead and enjoy the journey. You know, it goes fast. It's like raising a child. Raising a business is like raising a child. My first employee, she used to look at the company and tell us what stage we were in. She's like, "Oh, we're in the terrible twos." Well, you know what? They don't last forever, so enjoy them. And then she's like, "Oh, we're full blown teenager now. We've got teenager stuff going on." And she would compare a company to that. You know, sometimes you get so caught up in the moment that it's stressful and that hurts you physically. If you're feeling that, number one, go listen to The Power of Now. But number two, just take a minute and look back and say, hey, we've come a long way. Appreciate where you are. And then keep moving forward. It'll all be worth it.
Amazing, Calvin. Well, this has been an awesome episode of the Multipli Podcast. It's been a pleasure to talk with Calvin Bagley, the CEO of Nuvo Health. Calvin, thanks so much again for being on. Really enjoyed the conversation today.